He slammed her against the wall so hard, the blood pressure monitor exploded off its stand. A decorated Navy admiral, a man who commanded warships and thousands of sailors, had his fist locked around a 24-year-old nurse's throat. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't scream. Her feet barely touched the floor. Staff stood frozen in the doorway, too terrified to move. His eyes were not human. They were the eyes of a man still trapped in a war that followed him home. And the only thing that broke his grip was not a doctor, not a soldier, not a command. It was the bark of a German shepherd who feared no rank, no rage, and no man alive. Subscribe to this channel, stay with this story until the very end, and comment the city you are watching from so I can see how far this story reaches. The call came in at 6:47 in the morning, and Emily Carter almost didn't answer it. She was sitting on the edge of her bed in a studio apartment in Bethesda, Maryland, still wearing the scrubs she had fallen asleep in the night before. Her phone buzzed against the nightstand, and when she saw the hospital's number, her stomach turned. She picked up on the fourth ring. "Emily, it's Linda from staffing. We need you on the 4th floor today, room 412. Emily closed her eyes. "That's the officer wing." "It's the only open assignment," Maria called out, stomach flu. "You're the replacement." "Linda, I've been here 3 weeks. I haven't even finished orientation on that floor." "You finished your clinicals. You passed your boards. You're a registered nurse, Emily. Act like one." The line went dead. Emily sat there for a long time, staring at the phone in her hand. She had moved to Maryland 8 days after graduation. She had left behind a small town in Ohio where everybody knew her name, where her mother still worked the front desk at a dentist's office, where her biggest medical emergency had been a kid with a broken arm at summer camp. Now she was walking into Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, one of the most prestigious military hospitals in the country, and she was being asked to care for someone she had only heard about in whispers. Admiral Jonathan Reeves. She had never met him, but everyone on staff had a story. The first thing Emily heard about the Admiral came from a respiratory therapist named Doug, who told her during lunch on her second day, "Don't ever make eye contact with 412. He'll eat you alive." The second thing came from a senior nurse named Patrice, who had been at Walter Reed for 11 years. Patrice pulled Emily aside in the break room and said, "That man threw a bedpan at Dr. Kessler last Tuesday. Full bedpan. Kessler needed stitches above his left eye. And you know what happened? Nothing. Because he's Admiral Jonathan Reeves, and nobody in this building has the guts to write him up." The third thing Emily heard was from a janitor named George, who cleaned the 4th floor every night. George didn't say much. He just shook his head slowly and muttered, "That man isn't angry at us. He's angry at God. And God ain't listening." Emily walked through the front entrance of Walter Reed at 7:31 that morning. She clipped her badge to her scrub top. She tied her hair back. She took the elevator to the 4th floor, and she stood outside room 412 for almost 2 full minutes before she knocked. No answer. She knocked again. "Go away!" The voice on the other side was low, not loud, not shouting, just heavy, like a man who had used up every word he had and was rationing what was left. Emily opened the door. The room was dim. The blinds were shut. The television was off. There were no flowers, no cards, no personal items on the nightstand, just a glass of water that hadn't been touched and a call button that had been ripped from the wall and thrown into the corner. Admiral Jonathan Reeves sat in a wheelchair by the window, his back to her. His left leg ended just below the knee. The bandage around the stump was old. It needed changing. She could see that even from the doorway. "Good morning, Admiral. My name is Emily Carter. I'll be your nurse today." He didn't turn around. "I said go away." "I heard you, but your dressing needs to be changed and your vitals are overdue." Silence. Then he turned, slowly. And the look on his face wasn't anger. Not yet. It was something worse. It was evaluation. Like he was measuring her, weighing her, deciding how quickly he could break her. "How old are you?" he asked. 24. "How long have you been a nurse?" 3 weeks. He let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Almost. 3 weeks. They sent me a child. They sent you a nurse, sir. They sent me a replacement for a replacement. That's what you are. You're the person they call when nobody else wants the job. Emily didn't flinch. She had practiced this in the mirror that morning. She had told herself she wouldn't flinch. "I'm here to help you, Admiral. You're here because you were told to be here. There's a difference." He turned back to the window. The conversation was over. Or at least he thought it was. Emily walked to the supply cart by the door. She pulled on gloves. She gathered fresh gauze, saline, tape, antiseptic. She rolled a stool to his side and sat down. "I'm going to change your dressing now." "Don't touch me." "Your wound needs care, Admiral." "I said don't touch me." His hand came down on the armrest so hard the wheelchair jerked. Emily's hands froze in midair. Her heart was slamming. But she didn't stand up. She didn't back away. She sat there, looking at him, looking at the stump of his leg where flesh met nothing, where a man's body simply stopped. "Okay," she said quietly. "I won't touch you. Not until you're ready." He stared at her, waiting for her to leave, waiting for her to cry, waiting for her to do what every other nurse had done, which was walk out that door and never come back. She didn't. She sat on that stool, gloves on, gauze in her lap, and waited. 5 minutes passed. 10, 15. Admiral Reeves finally spoke. "You're still here." "I am." "Why?" "Because you still need your dressing changed." Something flickered in his eyes. It wasn't softness. It wasn't gratitude. It was confusion. Like a man who had spent so long pushing people away that he had forgotten what it looked like when someone refused to go. He extended his leg without a word. Emily changed the dressing. Her hands were trembling, but her technique was clean. She didn't speak. She didn't try to make conversation. She finished, disposed of the old bandage, documented the wound status, and stood up. "I'll be back at noon for your vitals," she said. He said nothing. She walked out. In the hallway, she pressed her back against the wall and exhaled so hard her chest hurt. Her hands were still shaking. Her badge was crooked. There was a tiny drop of saline on her shoe. Patrice was standing at the nurse's station watching. "You lasted longer than the last one," she said. "How long did the last one last?" 4 minutes. She came out crying. Emily nodded. "He's in pain. He's dangerous." "Those aren't mutually exclusive." Patrice raised an eyebrow. "Sweetheart, I've been doing this since before you were born. That man doesn't want help. He wants a fight. And if you keep going in there, eventually he's going to get one." Emily thought about that as she walked to the break room. She poured coffee into a paper cup and stood by the window, overlooking the parking lot. She thought about the Admiral's face when he turned around. Not the anger, the thing underneath the anger, the thing that lived in the space between his jaw clenching and his eyes going dead. She had seen that look once before, on her father's face. The year he lost his job at the factory in Canton. The year he stopped talking at dinner. The year he started sitting in the garage alone, staring at nothing, until Emily's mother would go out there at midnight and lead him back inside. Her father wasn't a violent man, but he was a proud one. And when life took his pride, it nearly took everything else with it. She wondered if Admiral Reeves had anyone who went to the garage at midnight. She finished her coffee and went back to work. At noon, she returned to room 412. This time, she didn't knock. She opened the door and walked in. Reeves was in the same spot, same chair, same window, but the blinds were open an inch. "Vitals," she said. He held out his arm without argument. She wrapped the blood pressure cuff. She placed the thermometer. She logged everything into the tablet. His blood pressure was elevated. His pulse was high. His temperature was normal, but his skin was pale and his eyes were bloodshot. When was the last time you slept, Admiral? When was the last time you minded your own business? This is my business. Your chart says you've refused sleep medication 3 times this week. I don't need medication. Your body disagrees. He pulled his arm away. My body lost the right to an opinion 6 months ago when it let itself get blown apart. Emily paused. She set the tablet down. She looked at him, not at his chart, not at his leg, at him. What happened to you wasn't your body's failure, Admiral. You don't know what happened to me. I know you survived an explosion that killed 2 of your men. I know you lost part of your leg. I know you've refused every form of psychological support this hospital has offered. And I know you haven't had a single visitor since you arrived. His face changed. The mask cracked. Just for a second. Just enough for her to see the raw, bleeding thing underneath. Who told you that? Your chart. My chart doesn't say I haven't had visitors. No, the nurse's log does. 0 visitors in 14 weeks. No family, no friends, no fellow officers. He turned away from her. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the armrests until his knuckles went white. Get out, Admiral. Get out. She left, but she didn't go far. She stood in the hallway and made a phone call. She called the hospital's psychiatric liaison office and asked to speak with someone about a patient on the 4th floor who was exhibiting signs of severe PTSD and had repeatedly refused evaluation. The woman on the phone told her the patient had the right to refuse. Emily said, "He also has the right to treatment. Who's advocating for that?" There was a pause. Then the woman said, "We'll send someone up for a wellness check." When? Within the week. That's not fast enough. Nurse Carter, we have protocols. And I have a patient who hasn't slept in a week and just told me his body lost the right to an opinion. Your protocols need to move faster. She hung up. Patrice was watching her again from the nurse's station. You called psych? Patrice asked. Someone has to. Honey, psych has been called on that man 6 times. He refuses every time. He signs the waiver. They leave. That's how it works. Then how it works is broken. The afternoon was quiet. Emily handled 3 other patients on the floor. She changed IVs. She administered medications. She comforted a young Marine who had lost both hands and kept asking her if he would ever hold his daughter again. She told him yes. She didn't know if it was true, but she said it like it was the truest thing she had ever known. And when he cried, she held his wrist, the only part of his arm that was still his, and she let him. At 4 o'clock, she went back to room 412 for the final check of her shift. The Admiral was not in his wheelchair. He was on the floor. He had tried to get to the bathroom by himself. His wheelchair had gotten stuck on the edge of the bathroom threshold, and he had fallen. His stump had hit the tile. The dressing she had changed that morning was soaked through with fresh blood. He was trying to pull himself up using the sink. His arms were shaking. His face was twisted. And the sound he was making wasn't a groan. It was something more private than that. Something a man like him would never allow anyone to hear. Emily rushed to his side. Admiral, let me help you. Don't. You're bleeding. I said don't. She knelt beside him. She put her hand on his shoulder, and he flinched, not from pain, from contact, like a man who hadn't been touched gently in so long that it burned. Jonathan, she said. He stopped. No one had used his first name in months. Not the doctors, not the staff, not even the chaplain who had tried to visit and been turned away at the door. Let me help you, she said again. He looked at her, and in that moment the Admiral wasn't an admiral. He wasn't a decorated officer. He wasn't the man who terrified an entire hospital wing. He was a 57-year-old man lying on a bathroom floor, bleeding from what was left of his leg, and the only person in the world who cared enough to kneel beside him was a girl young enough to be his daughter. He let her help. She cleaned the wound. She redressed it. She helped him back into the wheelchair. She didn't lecture him. She didn't scold him. She just worked, quiet and steady, until he was settled. Then she said, "I'm going to request a grab bar installed next to your toilet, and I'm going to leave a call button within reach. A new one. Please don't rip this one out." He almost smiled. Almost. "I'll see you tomorrow, Admiral." She walked to the door. "Carter," he said. She turned. He didn't look at her. He looked at the floor, at the blood she had just cleaned up, at the place where his pride had crashed and shattered. "Thank you," he said. It was barely a whisper, but she heard it. She nodded and closed the door behind her. That night, Emily sat in her apartment and cried. Not because she was scared, not because the job was too hard, because she had seen a man in pieces, and she didn't know if all the training in the world was enough to put him back together. She didn't know that somewhere on the other side of the hospital campus, Officer Daniel Morales was walking his K-9 partner Rex through the East Corridor as part of a temporary security detail. She didn't know that Rex, a 5-year-old German shepherd trained in detection and protection, had been stationed at Walter Reed for a routine 2-week assignment following a security threat at a nearby federal building. She didn't know that in 11 days, that dog would save her life. And she didn't know that the man she had just knelt beside on a bathroom floor would be the one she needed saving from. What Emily did know, sitting alone in her apartment with mascara streaking down her face and a cold cup of coffee in her hand, was that tomorrow she would walk back into room 412, and she would do it again the day after that, and the day after that, because somewhere between the Admiral's rage and his whispered thank you, she had made a decision. She was not going to give up on him, even if he gave up on himself, even if it cost her everything. The next morning came too fast. Emily Carter barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face. Not the rage, the thing underneath it. That split second when she said his first name and the entire war behind his eyes went quiet. She arrived at Walter Reed at 6:55, earlier than her shift, earlier than anyone expected. She clipped her badge, took the elevator to the 4th floor, and walked straight to the nurse's station. Patrice was already there, reading a chart. She looked up and shook her head slowly. "You're back." "I told him I would be." "Honey, half the nurses on this floor have told him things. Doesn't mean they came back." "I'm not half the nurses on this floor." Patrice studied her for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and lowered her voice. "Something you should know. Dr. Kessler filed a formal complaint yesterday. He wants the Admiral transferred to the VA psych facility in Baltimore. Says he's a danger to staff." Emily's chest tightened. "Transferred? He's still recovering from surgery." "Kessler doesn't care. That man needed 4 stitches because of Reeves. He wants him gone." "When does the board review it?" "End of the week, Friday. If the vote goes through, they'll move him by Monday." Emily stood very still. 5 days. She had 5 days before they shipped a wounded, broken man to a facility where he would be treated like a prisoner instead of a patient. She had seen the Baltimore VA psych ward during a clinical rotation. Gray walls, locked doors, staff who were so overworked they barely made eye contact. Admiral Reeves would die in a place like that. Maybe not physically, but every other part of him would. "Who's on the review board?" Emily asked. "Kessler, Dr. Winters, Colonel Hayes from Hospital Administration, and Dr. Amara from Psychiatry." "Dr. Amara. Has she ever actually met the Admiral?" "She's tried. Twice. He refused both times." Emily nodded slowly. Then she picked up her supply tray and walked to room 412. She opened the door without knocking. The Admiral was awake. He was sitting in his wheelchair, and the blinds were open wider than yesterday. Not all the way, but more. "Good morning, Admiral." He didn't tell her to go away. That was progress. She crossed the room and set her tray on the side table. "I need to check your dressing and take your vitals." "Fine." One word. No fight, no insult, just fine. She knelt beside him and began unwrapping the bandage. The wound looked better. The bleeding had stopped. The edges were clean. She applied fresh antiseptic, redressed it carefully, and stood up. Your wound is healing well, she said. The wound you can see is healing well, he replied. Emily paused. She looked at him. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the window, at the inch of sky visible through the blinds. Admiral, I need to tell you something. Then tell me. Dr. Kessler has filed to have you transferred to the VA psychiatric facility in Baltimore. The board votes on Friday. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the armrests. She watched the knuckles go white, the same way they had yesterday, and she braced herself for the explosion. It didn't come. Instead, his voice dropped to something low and dangerous. Kessler, that coward. He can't handle one bedpan to the face, so he wants to lock me in a cage. It's not a cage, Admiral. It's a treatment facility. I've seen those facilities, Carter. I've visited men in those facilities. Men who went in broken and came out hollow. Don't tell me what it is. Then give me a reason to fight the transfer. He turned to her. What? Give me a reason. Agree to the psychiatric evaluation. Talk to Dr. Amara. Show the board you're willing to engage in your own recovery. If you do that, I can advocate for you. If you don't, Kessler wins, and you go to Baltimore. His eyes narrowed. Why do you care? Because I'm your nurse. You've been my nurse for 2 days. And in 2 days, I've seen more fight in you than most people show in a lifetime. I'm not going to watch them warehouse you because it's easier than treating you. The room went quiet. The Admiral stared at her with an expression she couldn't read. It wasn't anger. It wasn't gratitude. It was something in between. Something that lived in the space where a man's pride meets his desperation. I'll think about it, he said. You have until Friday. She finished her vitals check and left the room. In the hallway, her hands were shaking again. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. The kind that comes when you realize you've just drawn a line in the sand and there's no stepping back. At 10:15 that morning, Emily was restocking the supply closet when she heard footsteps behind her. Heavy, deliberate. She turned and found herself face to face with Dr. Kessler. He was tall, mid-50s, silver hair. The stitches above his left eye were still visible, held together with thin strips of surgical tape. He looked at Emily like she was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. Nurse Carter, Dr. Kessler, I understand you've been spending considerable time with the patient in 412. He's my assigned patient. He's a violent individual who assaulted a physician, and I'm told you've been making phone calls to the psychiatric liaison on his behalf. Emily straightened her back. I made one phone call requesting a wellness check. That's within my scope of practice. Your scope of practice is changing bandages and taking blood pressure, not playing social worker for a man who belongs in a locked ward. With all due respect, doctor, he doesn't belong in a locked ward. He belongs in treatment. There's a difference. Kessler stepped closer. His voice dropped. Let me be very clear with you, Nurse Carter. You are 3 weeks into this job. You have no tenure. You have no allies on this floor. And if you interfere with my transfer request, I will make sure your career at this hospital ends before it begins. Emily's pulse was hammering. Her mouth went dry, but she held his gaze. Are you threatening me, Dr. Kessler? I'm advising you. There's a difference. He turned and walked away. Emily stood in the supply closet, alone, surrounded by gauze and saline and the sterile smell of things designed to fix people. And she realized that the Admiral wasn't the only one in this hospital who used intimidation as a weapon. At 12:30, she returned to room 412 with a lunch tray. The Admiral hadn't ordered food. He never ordered food. She brought it anyway. She set it on his table. Soup, bread, apple juice, standard hospital fare. I'm not hungry, he said. When was the last time you ate a full meal? Silence. Admiral? Tuesday. It was Thursday. Eat the soup, she said. That's not a request. He looked at her, and for the first time, something that almost resembled amusement crossed his face. You're bossy for a rookie. And you're stubborn for a man who needs help." He picked up the spoon. He ate the soup. Not all of it, but enough. While he ate, Emily sat on the stool and opened his chart on her tablet. She scrolled through his medical history, surgery dates, medication logs, therapy refusals, and then she found something that made her stop. Emergency contact. The field was blank, not crossed out, not declined, blank. Like no one in the world existed who should be called if Admiral Jonathan Reeves stopped breathing. "Admiral, your emergency contact field is empty." He put the spoon down. "I know. Is there someone we should list? Family? A spouse?" "My wife left 14 months ago, before the deployment. She said she couldn't watch me choose the Navy over her one more time." He paused. "Turns out she was right. The Navy chose for both of us." "Children?" "A son, Nathan. He's 31, lives in San Diego, works for a defense contractor." Another pause, longer this time. "He hasn't called since I got here." "Have you called him?" The Admiral's face hardened. "And say what?" "Hello, son. Your father got 2 men killed and lost a leg? Would you like to come see what's left?" "That's not what happened." "You don't know what happened." "Then tell me." He turned away. "No." Emily didn't push. She had learned that much already. The Admiral was like a door with a rusted hinge. You could force it open and break the frame, or you could apply oil, a little at a time, and wait. She finished her notes and stood. "I'll be back at 4. "Carter," she stopped. "Kessler came to see me this morning. Before you. He told me the transfer was already approved. He said the board vote was just a formality." Emily's blood ran cold. "He told you that?" "He stood in that doorway and smiled while he said it." "Is it true?" "I don't know, but the look on his face said he believed it." Emily walked out of that room with a fire in her chest that she hadn't felt since the day she decided to become a nurse. She went straight to the administrative office on the 2nd floor and asked to speak with Colonel Hayes. The receptionist told her Colonel Hayes was unavailable. Emily said, "Tell him it's about the patient in room 412 and the transfer request filed by Dr. Kessler. Tell him a staff member has concerns about the process." The receptionist stared at her. Then she picked up the phone. 10 minutes later, Emily was sitting in Colonel Hayes' office. He was a broad man with a crew cut and reading glasses that looked too small for his face. He listened to Emily without interrupting. She told him about the Admiral's willingness to consider psychiatric evaluation. She told him about Kessler's threat in the supply closet. She told him about the empty emergency contact field and the son who hadn't called and the wife who left. Colonel Hayes leaned back in his chair. "Nurse Carter, do you understand what you're doing right now?" "Yes, sir. You're a brand new nurse going on record against a senior physician. That's a career risk." "I understand that, sir." "Why?" "Because that man in room 412 is not a threat. He's a casualty, and we don't transfer casualties to storage facilities. We treat them." Colonel Hayes removed his glasses. He rubbed his eyes. "Dr. Kessler was assaulted, Nurse Carter. He has a legitimate grievance." "He does, and the Admiral should face consequences for that. But transfer to Baltimore isn't a consequence. It's abandonment, and this hospital is better than that." Hayes studied her for a long time. Then he said, "I'll delay the board vote by 1 week, 7 days. If Admiral Reeves agrees to a full psychiatric evaluation by Dr. Amara within that time, I'll reconsider the transfer. If he refuses, it goes through. That's the best I can do." "That's enough, sir. Thank you." She left the office and took the stairs instead of the elevator because she needed to burn off the electricity running through her body. 7 days. She had bought him 7 more days. At 4 o'clock, she went back to room 412. The Admiral was not in his wheelchair. He was standing, holding the grab bar she had requested, which maintenance had installed that afternoon. He was standing on his one remaining leg, gripping the bar with both hands, staring at himself in the bathroom mirror. Emily stopped in the doorway. She said nothing. He spoke without turning around. I used to run 5 miles every morning. 0, 500. Rain or shine. 32 years. I never missed a day. His voice cracked. Now I can't stand for 30 seconds without holding onto a bar meant for 80-year-old men. You're standing, Emily said. That's what matters. Standing isn't enough. It's a start. He turned his head. His eyes were red, not from crying, from the effort of not crying. You talked to Hayes. How did you know? Because Kessler came back an hour ago. He was furious. He said some rookie nurse went over his head. He called you unprofessional. He called you naive. He called you a liability. Emily's stomach dropped. What did you say? The Admiral looked at her. I told him to get out of my room. Emily felt something break open in her chest. Not sadness. Relief. The kind that comes when you realize the person you're fighting for has started fighting too. The board vote has been delayed 1 week, she said, but there's a condition. You have to agree to a psychiatric evaluation with Dr. Amara. A full evaluation. Not a handshake and a signature on a refusal form. A real session. I know what a psychiatric evaluation is, Carter. Will you do it? He was quiet for a long time. His grip on the bar tightened. His leg trembled. The muscles in his arms strained. If I do this, he said slowly, it goes on my record. Every admiral, every captain, every officer I've ever served with will know that Jonathan Reeves sat in a room and talked about his feelings. They'll also know he had the courage to do it. Courage. He almost spit the word. You want to know what courage looks like, Carter? Courage looks like Petty Officer First Class Marcus Williams throwing himself on top of me when the second charge detonated. Courage looks like Chief Warrant Officer David Park using his own body to shield the interpreter. Those men didn't talk about their feelings. They acted. And they died. And I sat in a hospital room with both my arms and one leg and a heartbeat I didn't earn. Emily crossed the room. She stood in front of him, close enough to see the lines around his eyes, close enough to see the scar on his neck from shrapnel he never talked about. Those men saved your life, Admiral. What are you going to do with it? He stared at her. His chin trembled. His grip on the bar was so tight his forearms were shaking. Monday, he said. I'll see Dr. Amara on Monday. Emily nodded. I'll set it up. She turned to leave. Carter, she stopped. If this goes wrong, if they use it against me, if they take what I say in that room and turn it into a reason to lock me away. He paused. I will never forgive you. Then let's make sure it doesn't go wrong. She walked out. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and pressed both hands over her mouth. Because what she hadn't told the Admiral, what she couldn't tell him, was that she had no idea if this would work. She had no idea if Dr. Amara would see what she saw. She had no idea if the board would listen to a 24-year-old nurse over a senior physician with tenure. All she had was 7 days and a gut feeling that the man in room 412 was worth saving. At 6:15, as Emily was clocking out for the day, she passed through the east corridor on her way to the parking lot. And that's when she saw them for the first time. Officer Daniel Morales was walking toward her in a dark uniform. Beside him, on a short lead, moved the most composed animal Emily had ever seen. A German shepherd. Dark coat, alert ears, eyes that scanned everything and reacted to nothing. The dog's name was stitched on his vest. Rex. Morales nodded as they passed. Emily nodded back. She barely gave them a second thought. She didn't know that Officer Morales had been assigned to Walter Reed as part of a temporary security detail following a credible threat against a high-ranking patient in the building. She didn't know that Rex had been trained in both detection and protection at the Capitol Police K-9 facility in Cheltenham, Maryland. She didn't know that Rex had already passed through the 4th floor twice that day, each time walking within 15 feet of room 412. And she didn't know that in exactly 9 days, in that same room, on that same floor, Admiral Jonathan Reeves would lose control in a way that no nurse, no doctor, and no amount of courage could stop. She didn't know that Rex would be the only thing between the Admiral's rage and her body. She didn't know any of that yet. What she knew was that tomorrow was Friday, and on Monday, the Admiral would sit across from Dr. Amara and either open the door to his own recovery or slam it shut forever. Emily drove home through the Maryland dark. She didn't turn on the radio. She didn't call her mother. She sat in silence and thought about a man standing on one leg in front of a mirror, looking at his own reflection like he didn't recognize the person staring back. And she thought about what he said about Marcus Williams and David Park, the two men who died so he could live. She wondered if he hated himself for surviving. She already knew the answer. Monday came like a held breath finally released. Emily arrived at Walter Reed at 6:30, a full hour before her shift. She hadn't eaten breakfast. She had barely slept. She had spent most of Sunday night sitting on her apartment floor with the Admiral's chart spread across her lap, reading every note, every refusal, every failed intervention from the past 14 weeks, looking for anything that might help Dr. Amara get through to him. What she found instead was a pattern that made her stomach turn. Every single psychiatric approach had been textbook. By the book, structured intake questions, standard PTSD screening tools, clinical language, clinical distance. And every single time, the Admiral had shut down within the first 5 minutes, signed the refusal, and sent them away. No one had tried to talk to him like a human being. They had all tried to talk to him like a diagnosis. Emily clipped her badge and took the elevator to the 4th floor. Patrice was at the nurse's station. "He's awake," Patrice said before Emily could ask. "Been awake since 4. George saw his light on when he was doing rounds." "Has he eaten?" "No." Emily grabbed a tray from the meal cart. Toast, scrambled eggs, black coffee. She carried it to room 412 and opened the door. The Admiral was in his wheelchair. He was wearing a clean shirt. His hair was combed. His jaw was freshly shaved, and his hands were gripping the armrests so tightly that the tendons in his forearms looked like bridge cables. Emily set the tray down. "You shaved." "Don't make it a thing, Carter." "I'm not making it a thing. I'm observing that you shaved. I shave every Monday. It has nothing to do with today." "Okay," she pushed the tray closer. "Eat." "I'm not hungry." "You haven't eaten since yesterday's soup. Eat the toast at minimum." He picked up the toast. He took one bite. He put it down. His hand was trembling. Emily sat on the stool. She didn't touch the tablet. She didn't reach for the blood pressure cuff. She just sat. "What time is Dr. Amara coming?" he asked. 9 o'clock. "How long?" "The session is scheduled for 1 hour." 1 hour. He repeated it like a prison sentence. 1 hour of some stranger picking through my skull, looking for broken pieces. She's not a stranger. She's a psychiatrist, and she's good. You've met her? I called her Friday afternoon. We spoke for 40 minutes. I told her about you. His eyes snapped to hers. You told her what about me? I told her you're not a case file. I told her you're a man who lost 2 friends and a piece of himself and hasn't been given a single reason to trust anyone in this building. I told her that if she walks in here with a clipboard and a checklist, she'll lose you in 5 minutes, just like everyone else. The Admiral stared at her. You said all that? I said more than that, but that's the part that matters. He picked up the coffee. He took a long drink. He set it down. Carter, if this woman asks me about the explosion, I don't know if I can talk about it. Then don't. Not today. Talk about whatever you can talk about. The rest will come when it comes. And if it never comes, it will. How do you know? Because you shaved. He looked at her for a long moment. And then something happened that Emily Carter had never seen. Not once. Not in 2.5 weeks. Admiral Jonathan Reeves laughed. It was short. It was rough. It sounded like an engine trying to turn over after years of rust. But it was a laugh. and it changed the entire weight of the room. At 8:45, Emily walked down to the second floor to meet Dr. Amara. She found her in the lobby, reviewing a file. Dr. Nadia Amara was a small woman with sharp eyes and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had served as a military psychiatrist for 23 years. She had treated Marines who had seen Fallujah, soldiers who had survived Korangal, pilots who had dropped ordnance on targets they still saw in their sleep. She was not someone who flinched. "Nurse Carter," she said without looking up. "Dr. Amara, thank you for doing this." "Don't thank me yet." She closed the file. "I've reviewed his chart. I've read your notes. I've also spoken with Dr. Kessler." Emily's stomach clenched. "What did Kessler say?" "He said Admiral Reeves is a violent, unstable man who should have been transferred weeks ago. He said you're an inexperienced nurse who has become emotionally compromised by a dangerous patient." "And what do you think?" Dr. Amara studied her. "I think Kessler got hit with a bedpan, and his ego is more bruised than his face. And I think you're either very brave or very foolish, and I haven't decided which yet." She stood. "Take me to him." They took the elevator to the fourth floor. Emily stopped outside room 412. "He's nervous. He won't show it, but he is." "I know. He responds to directness. Don't soften things. Don't use clinical language. Talk to him like he's a man, not a patient." Dr. Amara looked at her with something close to respect. "Anything else?" "His men, Williams and Park, the ones who died. Don't bring them up first. Let him." Amara nodded. Then she opened the door and went in alone. Emily waited in the hallway. She sat in a chair by the nurse's station and stared at the clock on the wall. 9 o'clock, 9:05, 9:10. Patrice brought her coffee. Emily didn't drink it. 9:15, 9:20. No shouting, no crash of furniture, no call button, nothing. 9:30. Patrice leaned over. "That's the longest anyone's lasted in there. Whatever you told that psychiatrist, it worked." 9:40, 9:50. At 9:53, the door to room 412 opened. "Doctor." Amara stepped out. She closed the door behind her and walked to where Emily was sitting. Her face gave nothing away. "Well?" Emily asked. Dr. Amara sat down across from her. She folded her hands in her lap. "That man in there is carrying enough guilt to crush a building. He blames himself for the deaths of Williams and Park. He believes he made a tactical error during the operation that caused the second explosion. He has replayed the last 47 seconds of that mission in his head every single night for 6 months. He cannot sleep because every time he closes his eyes, he hears Marcus Williams saying, 'Admiral, get down,' and then nothing." Emily pressed her hand over her mouth. "He told me he doesn't deserve this hospital bed. He told me he doesn't deserve the Purple Heart they gave him. He told me he deserved to die in that building, and the fact that he didn't is a mistake he can't fix." "Did he cry?" "No. He's beyond crying, Nurse Carter. He's in a place where the grief has fossilized. It's become part of his bone structure. We're not going to chip it out in one session. But you'll come back. I'll come back tomorrow, and Wednesday, and every day until the board meeting. But I need you to understand something." She leaned forward. "This man is at a tipping point. The evaluation is opening doors that have been sealed for 6 months. What's behind those doors is going to come out. And when it does, it won't come out clean. It will come out as anger. It will come out as violence. It will come out as the worst version of himself before it becomes the best." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the next few days are going to get worse before they get better. Much worse. And you need to be prepared for that." Emily swallowed. "I can handle it." Dr. Amara stood. "I hope so, because he asked me one question at the end of our session that told me everything I need to know about where his head is." "What did he ask?" "He asked me if I thought Nurse Carter was safe working with him." Emily felt the floor shift under her feet. "He asked that?" "He asked that. which means somewhere in that broken, furious mind, he knows he's dangerous, and he's afraid of what he might do. She paused. A man who asks that question is a man worth saving, but he's also a man standing on the edge of something very dark. Dr. Amara walked away. Emily sat in that chair for a long time, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold. He asked if she was safe. The man who terrified an entire hospital floor had asked his psychiatrist whether the one person who wouldn't give up on him was safe from him. At 11 o'clock, Emily went back into room 412. The Admiral was sitting in his wheelchair, but he looked different, smaller. Like the session with Amara had peeled away a layer of armor, and the man underneath was thinner than anyone expected. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like someone reached into my chest and rearranged things without asking permission. That's therapy. That's torture with a medical license." Emily checked his vitals. Blood pressure was lower than it had been in weeks. Pulse was still elevated, but his color was better. His eyes were clearer. "She's coming back tomorrow," Emily said. "I know. Will you see her?" He paused, a long pause. The kind of pause that sits between a man's pride and his survival. Yes. At 1:15 that afternoon, Emily was in the break room when her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. She opened it. "Nurse Carter, this is Nathan Reeves. I got your message from the hospital. You said my father is at Walter Reed." "I know. I've known for 3 months. I haven't come because the last time I saw him, he told me I was a disappointment to the Reeves name and that joining the private sector instead of the Navy was a betrayal he couldn't forgive. That was 2 years ago. If he wants to see me, he can ask. Don't call this number again." Emily read the message 3 times. She sat down slowly. She put the phone face down on the table. She had called Nathan Reeves on Saturday, using the emergency contact information she had tracked down through the hospital's family services coordinator. She had left a voice message saying his father was recovering from serious injuries and that his presence might help. She hadn't expected him to respond. She definitely hadn't expected this. A man so broken by war that he had already destroyed the one relationship that might save him. A son so wounded by his father's words that he chose silence over reconciliation. Emily picked up the phone and typed a response. She wrote and deleted 4 different messages before settling on one. "Nathan, I understand. I won't call again. But your father hasn't named a single emergency contact since he arrived. The field is blank. You should know that. You should know what blank means." She hit send. She didn't expect a reply. At 2 o'clock, she was back on the floor when she passed Officer Morales and Rex coming from the opposite direction. This time, she stopped. "Officer Morales?" He paused. Rex sat immediately, calm, alert, ears up. "Nurse Carter, right? 4th floor?" "Yes, I wanted to ask, how long is your unit stationed here?" "Through the end of next week. Routine security assignment." Emily looked at Rex. The dog looked back at her with brown, steady eyes that held more composure than most humans she had worked with. "He's beautiful," she said. "He's a professional," Morales corrected, but he said it with a half smile. "Rex has been working since he was 18 months old. Detection, protection, crowd control. Best partner I've ever had." "Does he ever visit patients?" Morales tilted his head. "He's not a therapy dog, ma'am. He's a working canine." "I know, I just thought—" She trailed off. "Never mind. Thank you, officer." She walked away. Behind her, Rex's eyes followed her all the way down the corridor. Tuesday, the second session with Dr. Amara. Emily wasn't in the room, but she could hear it from the hallway. Not words, just the Admiral's voice, louder than yesterday, rising and falling. At one point, something hit the wall. Not hard, not thrown, more like a fist against plaster. A controlled detonation of something that couldn't be controlled much longer. The session lasted 55 minutes. When Dr. Amara came out, her face was tight. He talked about the explosion today, she said. The second charge, the one that took his leg. He said he saw it coming. He said he saw the wire on the ground and didn't call it out fast enough. He believes that 1 second of hesitation killed Marcus Williams. Did it? The military investigation concluded the explosion was triggered remotely. There was nothing anyone could have seen on the ground. His hesitation, if it existed at all, was irrelevant to the outcome. But survivor's guilt doesn't listen to investigation reports, Nurse Carter. It writes its own evidence. How was he when you left? Quiet. Too quiet. I want to increase session frequency, daily, and I want to start him on a mild sleep medication. He needs to sleep. He's refused medication before. I'll prescribe it. You convince him to take it. At 4 o'clock, Emily brought the Admiral his evening medication. She set the small cup on his table. 1 pill, 5 milligrams. Dr. Amara prescribed this for sleep, she said. He looked at it like it was a live grenade. No. Admiral, I said no, I don't take pills. You take blood thinners. You take antibiotics. You take pain medication when the phantom limb symptoms spike. Those are different. How? Because those fix the body, this fixes the mind. And there's nothing wrong with my mind. Admiral, you haven't slept more than 2 consecutive hours in 6 months. Your body cannot heal if your brain won't shut down long enough to let it. My brain shuts down when it's ready. Your brain doesn't shut down because every time it does, you hear Marcus Williams telling you to get down. The room went dead silent. The Admiral's face drained of color. His jaw locked. His eyes went to a place that wasn't this room, wasn't this hospital, wasn't this country. Amara told you that, he whispered. She told me because she's worried about you, and so am I. She had no right. She's your doctor. I'm your nurse. We share information because your life depends on it. My life. He said it like it was a foreign word. My life is not the one that should have been saved. Emily stepped closer. Admiral, Jonathan, look at me. He didn't. Look at me. He did. And his eyes were the most devastated thing she had ever seen. More than the wound on his leg. More than the scars on his neck. His eyes held the kind of destruction that doesn't bleed. It just burns. Marcus Williams made a choice, Emily said. He threw his body on top of yours because that's what warriors do for their commander. You didn't take his life. He gave it. And if you spend the rest of yours punishing yourself for his sacrifice, you make that sacrifice mean nothing. The Admiral's hand came up to his face. He covered his eyes. His shoulders shook. And for the first time in 6 months, Admiral Jonathan Reeves cried. Not loudly. Not the kind of crying you see in movies. The kind that comes from so deep inside a man's body that it has no sound. Just trembling. Just breath. Just the collapse of every wall he had ever built. Emily didn't touch him. She didn't speak. She stood 3 feet away and let him have it. All of it. Every second. It lasted 4 minutes, maybe 5. Then he lowered his hand. His eyes were red. His face was wet. His jaw was still clenched, but the thing behind it had cracked. He reached for the pill. He swallowed it with a sip of water. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. Wednesday, Thursday, the sessions continued. Dr. Amara reported slow, painful progress. The Admiral was talking more, sleeping slightly longer, eating when Emily brought food. But something else was building, something Amara had warned about. The anger wasn't gone. It was shifting, like tectonic plates moving underground. The surface looked calmer, but the pressure was increasing. On Thursday night, Emily was leaving the hospital when she got a text from Patrice. Kessler was on the 4th floor today. Went into 412 when you were at lunch. Stayed 4 minutes. Emily called Patrice immediately. What did he say to him? I don't know, but when Kessler came out, he was smiling. And when I went in to check on Reeves 20 minutes later, the Admiral had torn his IV out of his arm. Blood everywhere. He wouldn't speak. He just sat there grinding his teeth. Emily hung up and drove back to the hospital. She went straight to room 412. It was 9:30 at night. The floor was quiet. She opened the door. The Admiral was in his chair. His arm was freshly bandaged where the IV had been. His face was stone. "What did Kessler say to you?" Emily asked. "Nothing." "Admiral, what did he say?" His voice was barely audible. "He said the board is going to vote yes on the transfer. He said Dr. Amara's report won't matter because the assault charge gives them all the justification they need. He said I'll be in Baltimore by Monday." "That's not decided yet." He said something else. "What?" The Admiral finally looked at her, and the thing in his eyes wasn't sadness anymore. It was something far more dangerous. "He said you're going to lose your job because of me. He said he's already spoken to the nursing director. He said your file is under review." Emily felt the blood leave her face. "He said the only reason you haven't been fired yet is because they're waiting for the transfer to go through. Once I'm gone, you're gone. That's what he said." Emily stood very still in that doorway. Her career, the career she had spent 4 years in school building, the career she had moved across the country for, the career that was supposed to be the beginning of everything. Kessler was going to take it from her, because she dared to care about a patient no one else wanted. "Admiral," she said, "I don't care what happens to my job. I care about what happens to you. You should care about your job, Carter, because I am not worth your future. That's not your decision to make." He stared at her, and in his eyes, behind the anger, behind the guilt, behind the 6 months of war still burning inside him, she saw something that terrified her more than anything Kessler could do. She saw a man who believed he destroyed everything he touched, and she saw that he was starting to believe he would destroy her too. Emily drove home that night with her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. She pulled into her apartment complex at 10:15. She turned off the engine. She sat in the dark. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nathan Reeves. 3 words. "Is he okay?" Emily stared at those 3 words for a very long time. Then she typed back, "No, he's not, but he's trying." She hit send and closed her eyes. Somewhere inside Walter Reed, a wounded admiral was lying in the dark, fighting a war that never ended. Somewhere in San Diego, a son was holding his phone, reading about a father who had pushed him away. Somewhere on the East Corridor, a German shepherd named Rex was walking his rounds, steady and silent, trained for the exact kind of violence that was building behind the door of room 412. And Emily Carter sat in her car in a Maryland parking lot, 24 years old, 3 weeks into the hardest job of her life, and realized that the thing she feared most wasn't losing her career. It was what would happen to the Admiral if she wasn't there when the walls finally came down. Friday morning, 6 days since the Admiral's first session with Dr. Amara. 1 day before the delayed board vote. Emily hadn't slept more than 3 hours. She had spent the night going over every scenario in her head. Kessler's threat, the transfer, her job, Nathan's text, the Admiral's eyes when he told her she wasn't worth her future. She arrived at Walter Reed at 6:15. The hallways were still dim. The night shift nurses were finishing their rounds. Emily went straight to the 4th floor and checked the Admiral's overnight chart. He had slept 4 hours, the longest continuous stretch since his admission. The sleep medication was working. His vitals were stable. His wound was healing. On paper, he was improving, but Emily knew better. Paper didn't capture what was happening beneath the surface. Paper didn't show the tectonic pressure that Dr. Amara had warned about. Paper didn't measure how close a man was to the edge. She knocked on 412. No answer. She opened the door. The Admiral was awake. He was sitting in his wheelchair, but he wasn't by the window. He was in the center of the room, facing the door, like he had been waiting for her. "Sit down, Carter." She sat. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." "Okay." He took a breath, a deep one, the kind a man takes before he jumps. The night it happened, the night of the operation. We were in a building outside Aden. I can't tell you the exact location because it's still classified, and I'll carry that classification to my grave. But I can tell you what went wrong. Emily didn't move. Intelligence said the building was clear. 2 floors, 6 rooms, no hostiles. We were there to recover communications equipment left behind by a forward operating team that had pulled out 72 hours earlier. Simple retrieval mission, in and out. I had done 100 of them. His voice was steady, too steady, like a man walking a tightrope and refusing to look down. I took 6 men in with me. We cleared the first floor in 4 minutes. No contacts, no threats. I sent Williams and Park to the second floor with 2 others. I stayed on the first floor with Chief Petty Officer Reyes and Seaman Torres to begin packing the equipment. He paused. His hands were on his knees. His fingers pressed into the fabric of his hospital pants. Williams radioed down. Second floor clear. All rooms empty. I gave the order to consolidate on the first floor for extraction, and that's when Park noticed the wire. Emily's breath stopped. It was against the baseboard, thin, almost invisible. It ran from the southeast corner of the room to a point underneath the staircase. Park called it out. He said, "Admiral, we have a wire." And I froze. His jaw clenched. A muscle in his neck pulsed. I froze, Carter, for 1 second, maybe 2. In 32 years of service, I had never hesitated, not once. But in that building, at that moment, something in my brain locked. I saw the wire and I knew exactly what it meant, and I could not make my mouth form the word. What word? Run. The room was so quiet, Emily could hear the fluorescent light buzzing above them. Park didn't wait for me. He grabbed the interpreter, a local man named Yusuf, who was helping us locate the equipment, and he shoved Yusuf toward the door. Williams came down the stairs. He looked at me. He saw that I wasn't moving, and he did what Marcus Williams always did when his commanding officer failed. He took over. The Admiral's voice cracked for the first time. A hairline fracture running through granite. Williams grabbed me by the vest and threw me toward the exit. Physically threw me. A petty officer first class putting his hands on an admiral and throwing him like a sack of equipment. And as he threw me, the first charge detonated. Emily pressed her fingernails into her palms. The blast knocked me through the doorway. I landed in the street. My ears were gone. Everything was ringing. I couldn't see. I couldn't stand. And then I heard the second charge, the big one, the one they had put under the staircase, the one connected to that wire. He stopped talking. His chest was heaving. His eyes were locked on a point somewhere beyond the walls of this room, beyond this hospital, beyond this country. He was back in that building. He was always back in that building. Williams was still inside. Park was still inside. The staircase came down on top of them. I was in the street with one leg pointed in a direction that legs do not point, and I was screaming their names, screaming until my throat bled, and nobody answered. He looked at Emily. They found Williams under the rubble 18 hours later. He was still on top of me, on top of where I had been standing before he threw me. His body was in the position of a man shielding someone. He died protecting a spot I wasn't even occupying anymore. Emily's eyes were burning. Park died instantly. The second charge was directly beneath his position. Yusuf survived because Park had pushed him far enough toward the door. Reyes and Torres survived because they were near the exit. I survived because Marcus Williams decided that my life was worth more than his. His voice dropped to almost nothing. He was wrong. Emily opened her mouth, but the Admiral held up his hand. Don't tell me he made a choice. Don't tell me it was his sacrifice and I should honor it. I have heard those words from every chaplain, every therapist, every well-meaning officer who visited me in Germany during recovery. I know what they mean, and I know they're not enough. Then what would be enough? He looked at her with the most honest expression she had ever seen on a human face. Nothing. Nothing will ever be enough. Marcus Williams had a wife named Diane and a 6-year-old daughter named Grace, and they will grow up without him because I couldn't say one word fast enough. The investigation cleared you, Admiral. The charge was remotely triggered. Your hesitation didn't cause the detonation. I know what the investigation said. I read it 11 times. But investigations don't know what I know. Investigations don't see what I see at 3 in the morning. Emily sat with that. She didn't try to fix it. She didn't offer comfort. She sat in the truth of it, ugly and unresolved. Because sometimes the most human thing you can do for someone is to stop pretending their pain has an answer. After a long silence, the Admiral spoke again. I told Amara everything I just told you. All of it. On Tuesday. And you know what she said? What? She said, Admiral, the men who saved your life need you to live it. And I wanted to throw her out of the room. I wanted to scream at her. But I didn't. Because she was right. And being right is the most infuriating thing a person can be when you're not ready to hear it. Emily nodded. Carter, I'm telling you this because tomorrow is the board vote. And I don't know what's going to happen. If they send me to Baltimore, I need someone to know the truth. Not the classified truth, the human truth. I need someone to carry it. I'll carry it, even if I'm not here. Even then, he turned away from her. Conversation over. But something had shifted between them. Not friendship, not trust. Something older than both. The kind of bond that forms when one person lets another see them at their absolute worst, and the other person doesn't leave. At 9 o'clock, Dr. Amara arrived for the 6th session. She nodded to Emily in the hallway and went in. The session lasted 70 minutes, the longest one yet. When Amara came out, she didn't stop at the nurse's station. She walked directly to the elevator. Emily followed her. Dr. Amara, wait. The psychiatrist turned. Her eyes were red. Are you okay? Emily asked. I've been a military psychiatrist for 23 years. I have treated men who have done and seen things that would break most people in half. And that man in there just described watching his men die with a level of detail and emotional clarity that I have rarely encountered. What does that mean for his evaluation? It means I'm going to submit a full report to the board recommending against transfer. He is engaged in treatment. He is making progress. Moving him now would be clinically catastrophic. Will the board listen? I don't know. Kessler has allies, and the assault charge is real. I can recommend all I want. The board makes the final call. At 11:30, Emily was at the nurse's station when she saw Dr. Kessler walking toward room 412. He had a folder in his hand and a look on his face that turned her blood to ice. She stood up. Dr. Kessler, where are you going? I'm checking on a patient, Nurse Carter. That is still within my scope of practice, isn't it? The Admiral has had a difficult morning. I don't think a visit from you right now is appropriate. Kessler stopped. He looked at her the way a man looks at an insect on his windshield. Nurse Carter, let me remind you of something. You have been here 1 month. I have been here 17 years. When I walk down this hallway, I don't need your permission, your approval, or your opinion. He walked past her and opened the door to 412. Emily stood frozen. She couldn't follow him in. She couldn't physically stop him. All she could do was stand in the hallway and listen. She heard Kessler's voice, low, controlled, deliberately calm. She heard the Admiral's voice, quiet at first, then louder. Then she heard Kessler say something she couldn't fully make out, but one word came through clearly, Baltimore. The Admiral shouted, not words, just sound, raw animal sound. Something hit the floor hard. Then Kessler's voice, sharp and loud. That is exactly the behavior that's going to put you in a locked ward, Admiral. The door opened. Kessler walked out. He looked at Emily. He smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The kind that says, I got exactly what I came for. I'd give him a minute before you go in, Kessler said. He's a bit agitated. Emily waited until Kessler disappeared around the corner. Then she pushed open the door. The Admiral had knocked the side table over. The water glass was shattered on the floor. His meal tray was upside down against the wall. His wheelchair was pushed back against the window, and he was gripping both armrests, breathing like a man who had just run a marathon. "What did he say to you?" Emily asked. The Admiral didn't answer. He was somewhere else. His eyes were glazed. His chest was heaving. The tendons in his neck were standing out like ropes. "Admiral, Jonathan, look at me. What did Kessler say?" His voice came out in fragments. He said Williams and Park would be ashamed of what I've become. He said their families would be disgusted if they knew I was sitting in a hospital room, feeling sorry for myself, instead of standing up like the officer they died for. Emily felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. "He said that to you?" "He said it with a smile on his face, Carter. The same smile he wore walking out of here. That's not a medical opinion. That's cruelty. That's deliberate provocation." It worked. Emily knelt in front of him. Glass crunched under her shoes. She put both hands on his armrests and looked directly into his eyes. "Listen to me. Marcus Williams would not be ashamed of you. David Park would not be disgusted. Those men saved you because they believed in you. Kessler said those words because he wants you to break. He wants you to explode. He wants to walk into that board meeting tomorrow with proof that you're dangerous. Do not give him that proof." The Admiral's breathing slowed. 1 degree, 2. His grip on the armrest loosened 1/2 inch. "I want to kill him," the Admiral said. Flat, honest, no drama. "I know. I have thought about what it would feel like to put my hands around that man's throat. I know, but you're not going to do that." "How do you know?" "Because Marcus Williams didn't save your life so you could throw it away on a man like Kessler." The Admiral closed his eyes. His jaw worked back and forth. She could see him fighting. Not her, not Kessler. The thing inside him. The thing that had been building for 6 months. The volcanic pressure that Dr. Amara warned about. He opened his eyes. "Get out, Carter." "Admiral, please." And the way he said please almost destroyed her. Because it wasn't dismissal. It was protection. He was sending her away because he didn't trust himself. "Please go." She went. She stood in the hallway and called Dr. Amara. The phone rang 6 times before the psychiatrist answered. Emily told her everything. Kessler's visit, what he said about Williams and Park, the Admiral's reaction. Amara was silent for 3 seconds. Then she said a word that Emily had never heard a psychiatrist use in a professional context. Then she said, "I'm calling Colonel Hayes. What Kessler did constitutes deliberate psychological aggravation of a patient under psychiatric care. It's a violation of hospital conduct policy. I'll have documentation filed within the hour." "Will it matter?" "The vote is tomorrow." "It will matter. Trust me." Emily hung up. At 2:15, she went back to 412. The Admiral was calmer. The broken glass had been cleaned up by George, who had come up from the night shift early when he heard what happened. The side table was upright. The meal tray was gone. Reeves was by the window. The blinds were fully open for the first time since Emily had started caring for him. "I'm sorry," he said. "You don't need to apologize. Not for the outburst, for asking you to leave. You were helping me, and I sent you away because I was afraid of myself. That's not weakness, Admiral. That's awareness." He was quiet for a moment. "Amara says awareness is the first step." "She's right. She also says the second step is harder." "What's the second step?" "Accepting that the person I am now is not the person I was before, and that the new person has to learn how to live in a world that doesn't make sense anymore." Emily sat on the stool. "Does it have to make sense?" He looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, does the world have to make sense for you to be in it? My father lost his job when I was 12. He sat in our garage for 7 months doing nothing, staring at a wall. My mother brought him back inside every night, and one day I asked him, 'Dad, does any of this make sense to you?' And he said, "No, baby, none of it makes sense, but your mother keeps coming to the garage, and maybe that's enough." The Admiral stared at her for a long time. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "My father sounds like a man who survived because someone refused to give up on him." He turned back to the window. "Carter, if the board votes to transfer me tomorrow, I want you to let it happen. Don't fight it. Don't put your career on the line again. You've done more for me in 2 weeks than this hospital has done in 4 months. That's enough." "It's not enough." "It has to be." "No, it doesn't." At 5 o'clock, Emily clocked out. She walked through the east corridor toward the exit, and there, coming from the opposite direction, was Officer Morales and Rex. This time Rex stopped before Morales did. The dog's nose lifted. His ears turned toward Emily. He took 2 steps in her direction, then sat, calm, watchful. Morales looked down at his partner. "That's unusual. He doesn't normally react to staff." "Maybe he knows something we don't," Emily said. She looked at Rex. Rex looked at her. And in that exchange, in that silent moment between a woman carrying the weight of a broken man and a dog trained to stand between danger and the innocent, something passed. Not understanding. Animals don't understand human stories, but recognition. The kind that doesn't need language. Emily nodded to Morales and kept walking. She didn't know that Rex had already cataloged her scent, that in the canine architecture of his trained mind, she was now registered. A person, a presence, part of his patrol territory. She didn't know that tomorrow afternoon, that catalog would save her life. At 8 o'clock that night, Emily was sitting on her apartment floor with a bowl of cereal she couldn't eat when her phone buzzed. "Nathan Reeves. I booked a flight. I land at Dulles Saturday afternoon. Don't tell him." Emily read the message twice. Her hand went to her mouth. She typed back with shaking fingers. "Are you sure?" "No, I haven't been sure about anything involving my father in 2 years. But you said he's not okay. And his emergency contact is blank, and I can't sleep knowing that." Emily set the phone down. She pressed both hands flat on the floor and breathed. Nathan was coming. The son the Admiral believed he had lost was getting on a plane. Not because his father asked, because a 24-year-old nurse told him the truth about an empty field on a hospital form. But Nathan wouldn't arrive until Saturday afternoon. The board voted Friday morning. And somewhere between now and then, the Admiral was lying in the dark in room 412, fighting the worst battle of his life against an enemy that wore his own face. Emily picked up the phone one more time. She typed a message to Dr. Amara. "Whatever happens in the board meeting tomorrow, Admiral Reeves cannot go to Baltimore. Not now. Not when we're this close." Amara replied 13 minutes later. "I've filed the conduct complaint against Kessler. Colonel Hayes has it. I've also submitted my full psychiatric evaluation. 6 pages. My recommendation is clear. He stays at Walter Reed. He continues treatment. He is showing clinically significant progress." Then a second message. "But Emily, I have to be honest with you. Kessler has 17 years at this hospital. He has relationships on that board, and the bruise above his eye is still visible. Logic doesn't always win against optics." Emily turned off her phone. She turned off the lights. She lay on her bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow the board would decide whether Admiral Jonathan Reeves would stay at Walter Reed or disappear into a system that would swallow him whole. Tomorrow Kessler would sit in that room with his stitched eye and his 17-year tenure and argue that a violent patient should be removed. Tomorrow, Dr. Amara would present 6 pages of psychiatric progress and hope that science carried more weight than politics. And Emily Carter, 24 years old, 1 month on the job, would have no seat at that table, no voice in that room, no power to change what powerful men had already decided. All she could do was walk into room 412 in the morning, look the Admiral in the eye, and tell him the truth, that she fought for him, that she would keep fighting, and that somewhere in the sky between San Diego and Washington, His son was already on his way. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock Friday morning. Emily arrived at Walter Reed at 5:45. She couldn't sit in her apartment. She couldn't wait. She had paced her kitchen until the downstairs neighbor knocked on the ceiling, and then she drove through empty Maryland streets with her window down and cold air cutting across her face. She went straight to the 4th floor. The corridor was silent. Night shift was wrapping up. George was mopping near the elevator. He looked up when he saw her. "You're early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." Neither could he. George nodded toward room 412. "Light's been on since 2. Emily stood outside the Admiral's door. She didn't knock. She pressed her palm flat against it and stood there for a moment, feeling the wood, feeling the weight of everything on the other side. Then she opened it. Admiral Reeves was dressed, not in a hospital gown, not in the standard issue pants and shirt he had worn every day since she met him. He was wearing his navy dress whites. The jacket hung slightly loose on a frame that had lost weight over 6 months. The metals were pinned precisely. The creases were sharp. His one remaining shoe was polished to a mirror finish. He had gotten dressed by himself, in a wheelchair, with one leg, and he looked like the commander he had been before the world took everything from him. Emily stopped in the doorway. "Admiral, I found this in the closet. They brought my uniforms from storage when I was admitted. I hadn't opened the bag until this morning." "Why today?" "Because if they're going to vote on what happens to me, they're going to see who I am, not what I've become." Emily's throat tightened. She walked to him and checked his vitals without speaking. Blood pressure elevated, pulse 104. His body was waging its own battle. "The meeting starts at 9, she said. "I know. You won't be in the room. The board meets privately." "I know that too." Dr. Amara submitted her report, 6 pages. "Colonel Hayes has the conduct complaint against Kessler. Everything that can be done has been done." He nodded. Then he looked at her. "Carter, whatever happens today, you need to hear something from me." "You don't have to say anything, Admiral." "Yes, I do, because I've spent 6 months not saying things, and it almost killed me." He straightened in his chair. "You are the only person in this hospital who treated me like a man instead of a problem. Every doctor, every therapist, every officer who walked through that door saw a case to manage. You saw a person to save. I don't know if it's because you're young, or naive, or stubborn, or just wired differently than the rest of them. But I know this. If I survive what I'm carrying, it will be because you refuse to let go." Emily bit the inside of her cheek so hard she tasted copper. "I'm not letting go, Admiral." "I know. That's what scares me." At 8:45, Emily walked to the 2nd floor conference room where the board would convene. She couldn't attend. She had no authority to be there. But she stood in the hallway outside and watched them file in. Dr. Kessler arrived first, pressed suit, polished shoes. The stitches above his eye had been removed, but the scar was still pink and visible. He carried a leather folder and walked with the confidence of a man who already knew the outcome. Dr. Winters followed, then Colonel Hayes, then Dr. Amara, who caught Emily's eye as she passed and gave a single, small nod. The door closed. Emily leaned against the wall and waited. 9 o'clock. 9:15. 9:30. She could hear muffled voices. At one point, Kessler's voice rose sharply. Then Amara's voice, steady and measured, cutting through like a blade. Then silence. 9:45. The door opened. Colonel Hayes stepped out alone. He looked at Emily. "Nurse Carter, a word." She followed him into an empty office across the hall. He closed the door. "The board has reached a decision." Emily couldn't breathe. "Dr. Kessler's transfer request has been denied." The room tilted. Emily grabbed the edge of the desk. Dr. Amara's evaluation was compelling. She presented evidence of significant clinical progress and argued convincingly that transfer would constitute a disruption of active treatment. Additionally, the conduct complaint you filed against Dr. Kessler regarding his visits to the patient's room raised serious concerns. Two nursing staff corroborated that Dr. Kessler made statements to the patient designed to provoke an emotional response. Patrice, Emily whispered. Nurse Williams and custodial staff member George Hernandez both provided written statements. Dr. Kessler has been formally reprimanded and removed from the patient's care team. Emily's knees buckled. She caught herself on the desk. However, Hayes continued, the board has attached conditions. Admiral Reeves must continue psychiatric treatment with Dr. Amara for a minimum of 12 weeks. He must participate in physical rehabilitation, and any further incident of violence against staff will result in immediate transfer with no review. One strike, that's it. I understand, sir. One more thing, Nurse Carter. The board noted your actions over the past 2 weeks. Advocating for a patient, filing appropriate reports, coordinating with psychiatry. It was also noted that you did all of this while under professional threat from a senior physician. He paused. That took guts. The board wants you to know that your position at this hospital is not under review. It never was. Kessler overstepped. Emily closed her eyes. She pressed her hand flat against her chest and felt her own heartbeat hammering under her palm. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. You did the work. Now go tell your patient. Emily took the elevator to the 4th floor. She walked down the corridor. Her legs felt like water. Her hands were trembling, but she was smiling. For the first time in weeks, she was genuinely smiling. She opened the door to room 412. The Admiral was exactly where she had left him. Dress whites, medals, polished shoe, hands folded in his lap, waiting for a verdict like a man waiting for a jury. You're staying, Emily said. He didn't react, not immediately. He sat perfectly still, the way a man does when he has prepared himself for the worst, and the best arrives instead, and his body doesn't know which muscles to use. They denied the transfer? His voice was barely audible. Denied. You stay at Walter Reed. 12 weeks of continued treatment with Dr. Amara. Physical rehabilitation. And Kessler has been removed from your care team. Removed? Formally reprimanded. He can't come near your room. The Admiral closed his eyes. His chin dropped to his chest. His shoulders, which had been locked at military attention all morning, released. It was the posture of a man who had been holding a wall in place with his bare hands and was finally allowed to let it fall. Carter, he said, and then he stopped, because the word he wanted to say next was too heavy for a man like him to lift. I know, she said. You don't have to say it. At 11:30, Emily was changing the Admiral's dressing when there was a knock at the door. Not a staff knock, hesitant, uncertain. Emily opened it. A young man stood in the hallway, 31 years old, dark hair, the same jawline as the Admiral, the same eyes. He was wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt and holding a coffee cup from the airport like it was the only thing keeping his hands from shaking. Nathan Reeves. Emily stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind her. You're early. I thought your flight didn't land until this afternoon. I took the red-eye. I couldn't wait. He looked at the closed door. Is he in there? He's in there. How is he? Better today than he's been in months, but he doesn't know you're coming. Nathan's face twisted. Not anger, fear. The specific kind of fear that only exists between a father and a son who have said unforgivable things to each other. Nurse Carter, the last words my father said to me were that I was a disgrace to his name. He said I chose money over duty. He said I abandoned the family legacy. And then he deployed, and I told myself I didn't care if he came back. But you did care. I cared so much it made me sick. And when I found out he was hurt, when I heard about the explosion in the leg in Walter Reed, I told myself he deserved it. I told myself that for 3 months. His voice broke. What kind of son tells himself that? The kind of son whose father wounded him. But Nathan, your father is not the same man who said those words. The man in that room has spent the last 2 weeks tearing himself apart so he can become someone better. And he needs you. He told you he needs me? He told me his emergency contact field is blank. That says everything he can't. Nathan looked at the door. His hand came up to his face. He wiped his eyes quickly, the way men do when they don't want anyone to see. "Will you go in with me?" he asked. "No, this is between you and him." Emily opened the door. She stepped aside. Nathan walked in. She closed the door and stood in the hallway, and through the wood, she heard the Admiral say one word, just one, in a voice she had never heard him use. Not the command voice, not the angry voice, not the broken voice, a father's voice. "Nathan." And then she heard nothing, because some moments are too sacred for sound. Some reunions happen in a language that doesn't use words. And whatever passed between Admiral Jonathan Reeves and his son in that room, it belonged to them alone. Emily walked to the nurse's station. Patrice was there. She had tears on her face, which was something Emily had never seen and never expected to see. "His boy is here?" Patrice asked. "His boy is here." "Lord have mercy." Patrice pressed a tissue to her eyes. "You did that." "I made a phone call. Nathan did the rest." "Don't you dare minimize what you did, Emily Carter. Don't you dare." At 1:15 that afternoon, everything changed. Emily was in the supply closet restocking gauze when she heard it. A crash from room 412. Not a glass breaking, not a tray falling. The sound of heavy furniture hitting the floor. A wheelchair overturning. Then Nathan's voice, loud, panicked. "Dad! Dad, stop!" Emily ran. She reached 412 in 8 seconds. She threw the door open. The Admiral was out of his wheelchair. He was on the floor, but he was moving, crawling. His face was contorted into something unrecognizable. His eyes were not seeing this room. They were seeing Aiden. They were seeing The Wire. They were seeing Marcus Williams. Nathan was on his knees beside him, trying to hold his father's shoulders. "Dad, it's me. It's Nathan. You're in the hospital. You're safe." But the Admiral was not in the hospital. He was in the building. The sound of his wheelchair crashing had triggered it. Metal on tile, the same frequency as the first charge detonating. And his brain had done what brains do when they have been shattered by trauma. It had sent him back. Emily dropped beside him. "Admiral, look at me. You are at Walter Reed. You are not in Aiden." His hands shot out and grabbed her arm. The same arm he had grabbed weeks before. But this time, the grip was different. This time there was nothing behind it but blind, animal terror. He was holding on to her like a man drowning in open water. His fingers dug into her flesh so hard, she felt the bruise forming in real time. "Get down," he screamed, not at her, at someone who wasn't there. "Williams, get down! The Wire, get down!" Nathan looked at Emily with wild eyes. "What do I do?" "Talk to him. Keep talking. Use his name, his first name." "Dad, Jonathan, it's Nathan. You're in your room. There's no wire. There's no building. You're with me." The Admiral's grip tightened. Emily's vision blurred from the pain. Her arm was going numb. She could feel his fingernails breaking skin through her scrub sleeve. And then, from the hallway, a sound cut through the chaos like a knife through static. A bark. One single, deep, authoritative bark. Rex appeared in the doorway. Officer Morales was behind him, but Rex was already moving. The German shepherd crossed the room in 3 strides and placed his body directly between the Admiral and Emily. Not aggressive, not attacking, positioned, the way a wall positions itself between a storm and a house. Rex lowered his head. He looked directly at the Admiral, and he let out a sound that was not a growl and not a bark. It was something in between, a low, steady vibration that said, "I am here, and you will stop." The Admiral's grip on Emily's arm loosened. His eyes, which had been somewhere in Yemen, slowly traveled to the dog, to the brown eyes staring into his, to the absolute, unshakable calm of an animal that did not know fear and did not respond to rank. "Admiral," Officer Morales' voice came from the doorway. Firm, professional. "Release the nurse, now." The Admiral's fingers opened. Emily pulled her arm free. Nathan caught his father's shoulders and held him. Rex didn't move. He stayed exactly where he was, his body a barrier, his eyes locked on the Admiral, until the man's breathing slowed, until the trembling stopped, until the war behind his eyes retreated to whatever dark corner it lived in. Then Rex did something no one expected. He stepped forward and pressed his nose against the Admiral's hand, gently, the way a dog greets someone it has decided to protect rather than fear. The Admiral looked at the dog, and his face crumbled. Every wall, every defense, every year of military composure, it all collapsed at once, and what was left was a 57-year-old man sitting on a hospital floor with his son's arms around his shoulders and a German shepherd's nose against his palm, crying so hard his entire body shook. Nathan held him. Rex stayed. Emily pressed her hand against her bruised arm and watched. And Officer Morales stood in the doorway, one hand on his belt, the other wiping his eyes. The aftermath was quiet. Dr. Amara arrived within the hour. She conducted an emergency evaluation. The flashback was severe but not unexpected. She adjusted his medication. She extended his treatment plan. She sat with him for 40 minutes while Nathan waited outside. When she came out, she looked at Emily's arm. The bruise was already dark purple. The fingernail marks were welted. "You need to document that," Amara said. "I know. Are you going to file a report?" Emily looked through the window of 412. The Admiral was in his wheelchair. Nathan was beside him. Rex was lying on the floor at the Admiral's feet. Officer Morales had allowed it. Just this once. "No," Emily said. "I'm not filing a report." "Emily, he wasn't attacking me, Dr. Amara. He was drowning. And drowning people grab whatever they can reach." Amara studied her for a long time. "You are either the bravest nurse I have ever met or the most stubborn. Can I be both?" In the weeks that followed, the Admiral's recovery became something the staff at Walter Reed talked about, not in whispers, but in wonder. He attended every session with Dr. Amara. He began physical rehabilitation with a prosthetic fitting team. He ate meals at regular times. He slept 5, then 6, then 7 hours a night. Nathan stayed in Maryland for 3 weeks. He rented a hotel room in Bethesda and visited every day. The conversations between father and son were not easy. They were slow. They were painful. There were days when Nathan walked out of room 412 with red eyes and a clenched jaw. And there were days when the Admiral asked Emily to cancel his sessions because he couldn't face both his psychiatrist and his son in the same 24 hours. But they kept showing up, both of them, and Rex kept coming. Officer Morales' security detail ended, but he filed a request through Capitol Police to continue K-9 visits to Walter Reed as part of a pilot therapy support program. The request was approved. 3 times a week, Rex walked through the 4th floor and spent 30 minutes in room 412. The Admiral, who had once commanded warships, who had once sent men into battle with a single word, who had once been feared by every staff member on the floor, would sit in his wheelchair and rest his hand on Rex's head and say nothing. Just breathe. Just exist in the company of an animal that asked nothing of him except presence. 4 months later, on a clear October afternoon, Admiral Jonathan Reeves walked out of Walter Reed on a prosthetic leg and his own 2 feet. Nathan was on his right side. Emily was on his left. Officer Morales and Rex were waiting at the front entrance. The Admiral stopped on the sidewalk. He looked back at the building. Then he looked at the people standing around him. "I walked into this place as a dead man," he said. "The fact that my heart was still beating was a technicality." He turned to Emily. "You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. I spent 32 years in the Navy, and I have never met anyone with more courage than a 24-year-old nurse from Ohio who wouldn't leave my room. He turned to Nathan. I owe you an apology that will take the rest of my life to deliver, and I intend to deliver every word of it. He turned to Rex. He knelt, slowly, on his prosthetic leg. He put both hands on the dog's face. Rex's tail moved once, twice. And you, the Admiral said quietly, you are the only one who ever got through to me by saying nothing at all. 6 months after his discharge, Admiral Reeves gave a speech at a veterans rehabilitation fundraiser in Washington, D.C. The room was filled with officers, politicians, medical professionals, and families of wounded service members. He did not talk about medals. He did not talk about missions. He did not talk about the Navy. He talked about a bathroom floor and a nurse who knelt beside him. He talked about a psychiatrist who asked the right questions at the right time. He talked about a son who got on a plane despite every reason not to. And he talked about a German shepherd who walked into the worst moment of his life and stood there, calm and immovable, until the storm passed. Emily Carter was in the audience. She was 25 now. She had been promoted to senior nurse on the 4th floor. Patrice had pinned the new badge on her scrub top and said, "Don't let it go to your head." Officer Morales was there. Rex sat beside him, still and composed, wearing a vest that now read, Therapy, Support, K9, in addition to his Capitol Police insignia. Nathan Reeves was in the front row. He had moved to Virginia. He visited his father every Sunday. The Admiral stood at the podium on his prosthetic leg, steady and upright, and he said words that silenced every person in that room. I was a man who commanded fleets, and I nearly destroyed the only people brave enough to stand in my path. Courage is not what you show on the battlefield. Courage is what you show when the battlefield follows you home. It is admitting that you are losing a war no one can see. It is letting a stranger kneel beside you on a bathroom floor. It is letting your son see you cry. It is letting a dog teach you what discipline really means. He paused. He looked at Emily. He looked at Nathan. He looked at Rex. I am alive today because 3 souls refused to give up on a man who had given up on himself. A rookie nurse who wouldn't leave. A son who got on a plane. And a police dog who feared no rank, no rage, and no broken man. The room stood, every chair emptied. The applause filled the hall like thunder. And in the silence between the Admiral's last word and the audience's first response, Emily Carter looked across the room at a man she had once found bleeding on a bathroom floor, and she understood something that no textbook had ever taught her. That healing is not a medical procedure. It is an act of war against despair. It requires soldiers who refuse to retreat. It requires allies who show up uninvited. And sometimes it requires a German shepherd who walks into chaos and stands there, unmoving, until the person on the other side remembers who they are. Admiral Jonathan Reeves survived an explosion that took his leg and 2 of his brothers. But it was a rookie nurse, a stubborn son, and a fearless dog who brought him home. And that is where his real story began.